stories a nation prefers to forget.
There are stories a nation tells to itself, and stories it prefers to forget. This is one of the latter, a story of a man who forced an empire to change course, if only for a moment. A man named Mashpiyaluta, Red Cloud, who waged a war that the United States did not expect and could not simply ignore. Call it luck, call it strategy, call it the stubborn will of a people defending what they cannot name in English. The Lakota called it the heart of everything that is. To them, the prairie, the rivers, the buffalo paths, these were not empty land. They were the center of life itself. In the mid-19th century, the young United States looked west the way a monarch eyes unoccupied estates. The settlers saw empty land. The law called it unused, available, ripe for settlement. To the families already living there, it was not unused at all. It was everything. They even wrote programs and treaties to make the thinking official. Maps, lines, legalese that stripped nations of names and replaced them with numbers of acres. Indian removal, the government called it. A polite phrase for uprooting whole ways of life. This film is not a simple biography, it's an excavation. We will dig through battle smoke, treaty ink, and broken promises to reconstruct the life of a warrior who became a strategist, a diplomat, and, eventually, a living indictment of a nation's contradictions.
Faint ghost images of old
If you stand on the Powder River grasslands on a late summer evening, you can almost hear the old maps unmake themselves. Wind moves like water through the buffalo grass. Hollow trails cut by hooves mark the passage of centuries. For the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, this land was not simply terrain. It was a cathedral, a granary, a library. Their calendars, rites, and survival strategies were written into these plains.
This careful balance enabled both rotated grazing and the success of timed hunts.
They rotated grazing. They timed hunts. They honored rivers and hills. Borders existed, but they were the kind of borders living peoples have. Flexible, ceremonial, practical. In short, they had a deep ecological knowledge honed over generations. Then newcomers arrived who saw only vacancy. A term, empty and unused land, was minted and rolled out like a carpet to justify what came next. Mashpiyaluta, Red Cloud, was born around 1822 into the Oglala Lakota. He was not destined for biography when he was a boy. Like many youths, he was meant to learn the ways of his people, to hunt, to listen, to survive. But a single act can tilt a life. When his cousin was murdered by warriors from another tribe, the young man felt the hot pressure of shame and honor. To run from a fight in that culture was more than cowardice. It was a stain. So he put on the red feathers, painted his face, and rode out with the others. That first fight changed him. The boy who returned was recognized. He had shed adolescence like old skin and stepped into purpose. The spears and trophies he brought back, they were not trophies of vanity. They were a ledger of survival and status. The community saw him differently. He saw himself differently.
We're finally hitting the vein, boys. Keep digging.
In the 1860s, the world felt the pull of gold. Montana's rivers began to glitter. Prospectors and opportunists poured west. And where men went to dig for wealth, they laid tracks, cut roads, and changed the land. The so-called Bozeman Trail was one of those changes. Not a highway, but a shortcut. John Bozeman discovered a path through the heart of the Powder River country that shaved days off the trip to the goldfields. For settlers and gold hunters, it was a fortune accelerator. For the local tribes, It cut across their best grazing, their hunting grounds, their sacred sites.
Imagine someone carving a road.
Imagine someone carving a road through your pantry and then calling the pantry unused. That is the moral tone of this era.
Get that timber up now. We don't have all day.
The U.S. Army established forts along the new route. Fort Reno,
right,
Fort
Heath.
Phil
Put
Kearny,
your backs into it,
Fort
man.
C.F.
Steady,
Smith,
steady.
and with
Mind
them
the
came
mark.
the assumption that treaties were formalities,
leverage
that
over
forts
here.
could stand on foreign ground and legitimate
The
settlement.
agreement is finalized
In
before the main
1866,
delegation arrives.
at Fort Laramie,
terms
commissioners
are clear.
summoned chiefs from the tribes near Powder River. The purpose was simple: secure the trail, keep
will
the miners
speak when the
safe,
fire burns
protect
low.
the mail. The expectation was that the chiefs would accede. Red Cloud went to the meeting, but he came as a warrior with a purpose. He watched the soldiers and saw not negotiators, but builders who had already brought men and equipment to begin fort construction.
This is the Powder
He
River
understood the
country.
game.
We have
He
defended
rose
it.
from his
We will
seat and,
continue
in
to
words
defend
recorded
it.
by
We are
witnesses,
not leaving.
declared that if the forts were built, he would see them destroyed. Then he walked out. The U.S. dismissed him. They had rifles, engineers, and the arrogance of manifest intent. But they had underestimated what organization, resolve, and local knowledge could do. Red Cloud did not attack forts head-on. He could not. He had no siege guns, no lines of supply. He used something older and more effective. He attacked the lifelines.
Ambush! Take cover! Return fire!
Supply wagons, forage parties, the scaffold of logistics. They sustained the forts. Cut them, and the forts wither.
Watch the ridge!
His fighters moved like wind. By night, they hit wagon trains bringing wood and food. They stole horses. They harried miners. By morning, they vanished. The army could not engage an enemy it could not find reliably. The result was not only physical loss, it was psychological. Soldiers began to leave their posts in fear. Officers wrote begging messages to Washington that sounded less like tactical reports and more like pleas. "We are being worn out," they said. Supplies were delayed, men starved, discipline frayed. Red Cloud's genius was to turn the American advantage, shape, supply lines, fortifications, into its own liability.
People imagine warriors as berserkers. Red Cloud was not a berserker. He was a conductor. He arranged fear like notes. He knew which string to pluck and how loud to make it. I will go with you.
And he learned from the enemy as well. When the U.S. introduced faster-loading revolvers, Red Cloud's bands intercepted supply wagons to arm themselves. They adopted technology and used it against those who brought it. In December, a trap worked as intended. Under luring pretenses, crafted by the Lakota, a detachment of soldiers was tricked into a ravine where thousands of warriors lay waiting.
Take cover! Move up to the ridge! We're surrounded! It's an ambush!
The result was a catastrophic defeat for that unit. The episode became known in American histories as the Fetterman Massacre. A clear signal that these were not disorganized raids, but strategic, well-planned operations. The shock was political. Clerks in Washington re-evaluated assumptions. Generals publicly admitted vulnerability.
The situation at Powder River has deteriorated significantly. The Sioux and Cheyenne resistance is far greater than anticipated.
The cultural image of the savage was replaced in private with urgency and, in some cases, fear. One of the engagements that crystallized the war's brutality and tactical ingenuity was the wagon box fight. Here, a train of wood and supplies became a temporary fortress. The soldiers formed a ring with the wagons and fired from relative safety.
Move those barrels into place!
In past raids, such temporary defenses had been overrun. This time, new weapons and better tactics helped the soldiers hold. The wagon box engagement cost lives on both sides. It demonstrated how the tactical balance could swing one way or another depending on technology, terrain, and sheer stubbornness. As the seasons turned, Red Cloud planned for a larger blow. He timed raids to hit the fort's supplies in winter, when starvation and cold would multiply the consequences. The plan worked. The fort's men grew weaker in cold months. Foraging outside the stockades became deadly.
The fort cannot hold out. We must act now.
We are aware of the situation, Mr. Secretary.
The United States faced a choice: keep fighting at great cost, or negotiate. Political pressures in Washington, the drain on military resources, and the expense of continuous operations pushed the government toward diplomacy.
We seek lasting peace and friendship between our peoples.
He says they desire lasting peace.
We hope this treaty is honored by your
In 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie was signed. It was remarkable not because it guaranteed peace forever. History would prove otherwise, but because it represented a true tactical success for Red Cloud. The United States agreed to abandon the forts built along the Bozeman Trail and promised to respect the Powder River country for a time. For a brief historical moment, a native leader managed to dictate terms to a superpower. The treaty recognized the reality of the land. It was not empty. The forts came down. The trail's immediate threat was reduced. Red Cloud had won. Imagine explaining that to a future historian, that an American general left his fort because a Lakota chief made it too costly to stay. It sounds like a footnote in history, and yet, for those years, it changed how people moved across that land. Victory, however real, does not protect memory from greed. After gold was found in the Black Hills, the calculus changed. Settlers returned. Miners flooded the sacred hills. Treaties were reinterpreted or ignored. Promises became paper ghosts.
My.
The Commissioner acknowledges your statement. They are reviewing the maps of the territory now.
The U.S. would not be content with a treaty that constrained expansion. The Black Hills, a sacred place for the Lakota, analogous to Jerusalem and other faiths, would lure yet another incursion. The government would find ways to nullify commitments it had made. Red Cloud himself traveled to Washington repeatedly, pleading for fairness. Each trip revealed the limits of being heard in a capital where power's priorities outweighed petitions. He watched, in his lifetime, as his people were slowly pushed into reserves far smaller than their ancestral lands. He died with a bitter truth. A treaty he had forced was, in practice, temporary. What does it mean to win a war and lose the peace? For Red Cloud, the answer was a moral geography. Even a victory that removed forts could not fix the deeper asymmetry of law and force. The United States had the machinery of nationhood. It could sign, revise, and break documents at scale. The Lakota had courage, skill, and spiritual ties, but not the bureaucratic vigor to compel lasting adherence. And yet, the moment mattered. It is not only the endpoints of empire that count, but the resistance they encounter along the way. Red Cloud's resistance delayed settlement. It forced concessions. It carved out time for his people. That time was precious. When settlers lingered and roads spread, ecosystems changed. Buffalo herds were slaughtered en masse. Grasslands were fenced. Watercourses were rerouted. The Lakota's world, their subsistence, ritual, and mobility contracted. This was not incidental. The attack on the buffalo was not only hunting, it was a strategic undermining of a people's basis for autonomy. The animals that sustained nations were killed in numbers that defy comprehension. With the animals went the seasons, the rites, the songs.
What if Red Cloud's treaty had held? What if the Powder River country had remained off limits to miners? Could a different North America have emerged? A North America, one in which the frontier was negotiated rather than extinguished?
It's tempting to daydream. A world where treaties are honored, where the ecology remained intact, where cultural pluralism grew, not by assimilation, but by genuine accommodation. Yet counterfactuals are moral instruments, not predictions. They illuminate what could have been and show the cost of choices made.
In old age, Red Cloud watched the map of his people's life shrink. He lived to his late 70s. He had traveled to Washington more than once and always returned with the same sorrow. Treaties signed on paper, violated in practice. He is reported to have said, with the weary clarity of a man who had seen a way of life diminished, that they had promised him many things, so many promises he could no longer count them. But only one promise had been kept. It was the promise to take the land. This is not a neat moral tale with a tidy conclusion. It is a mirror. It asks us, how does an empire make peace with the people it displaces? How do legal systems, military power, and profit motives interact to erase whole ways of life? And what is the cost, measured not in dollars but in songs unsung and sacred places desecrated? Red Cloud's campaign matters because it demonstrates that resistance can be effective. It matters because it shows the moral bankruptcy of policies that call land unused to justify taking it. It matters because the consequences of those decisions are alive in American politics and land use policy today.
Where buffalo, the Powder River Basin.
If you stand now where Red Cloud stood, the grass will be shorter and the fences longer. But the land remembers. Stories linger in creek beds and ridges. The Lakota still speak, still sing, still remember what it is to call a place sacred. Red Cloud's victory was temporary. His witness is permanent.
The buffalo herds practiced a natural form of rotated grazing, allowing the plains
History
to
can be an
regenerate.
instruction manual or a tombstone. We can choose one or the other. The lesson of Mapialuta is not that empires cannot prevail. It is that courage, strategy, and deep attachment to place can alter the course of expansion, even if only briefly, and that those moments matter. So listen for those stories the maps tried to hide. In them we find not only tragedy, but the stubborn truth that some hearts will not be priced. They can only be understood.